It's the week ending Saturday the 16th of February, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen Olivia Colman winning a BAFTA for her role in The Favourite, the government axing Seaborne Freight's controversial no-deal Brexit contract, and NASA officially ending the mission of Mars rover Opportunity. But we're here to bring you some of the stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team is Arion McNicoll, from the Week Junior, Felicity Capon, and from a Skype connection somewhere, it's our special guest, Edith Bowman. Hi, Edith.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Where are you? What glamorous location do we find you in?
I'm in my house. I'm in my little office with my kids watching the Lego movie downstairs. So if you hear fits of laughter and shouts, "Mom!" it's the first day of half term for us. So I might have to just lock the door and ignore them.
The old bait and switch.
Yeah.
Well, you get to start the show this week, Edith. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Regional accents taking over the world.
900 miles of tracks and
1,000 different accents.
Every valley and peak
shifts the way that we speak.
If it's nippy, we say it's code.
Don't take your jumper, take your gansy.
We don't ask if you'd like something nice for your dinner.
We say, for your tea, do you want out fancy?
We're dig deepers.
And nurse sleepers.
We don't get in a mood.
We get marder.
We are big spoons.
And come on the tunes.
We're not covered in mud.
We're clarty.
We're not squeamish.
We're beamish.
We're hardy.
I worry our international listeners are expecting a conversation about Klingon now. That was a clip from rail company LNER's new promotional video Track Record, recording some of the accents overheard from London to Edinburgh. Edith, what's the story?
London to Aberdeen, actually. The story is about research that's been done, which kind of the results, unfortunately, show a slight decline or a fear that the regional accent is on the decline. So LNER have commissioned this wonderful poem that celebrates all those dialects and accents that you hear up their East Coast line, and I've been lucky enough to be part of it, to contribute to the poem and to the video and audio recording of it, because for me it's got a real personal connection. When I was first starting out, I was told when I was trying to get work experience way back at the start that, they could never put someone with an accent like mine on the radio. And then even afterwards, applying for various TV jobs, being encouraged to go for elocution lessons, but being very kind of adamant that I wasn't going to do that because my accent is part of me, it's part of my character, it's part of my story.
But it's not purely celebratory, is it, this new story around the track that you've been working on? Because it's not just saying, aren't regional accents great? It's saying that there's a survey claiming that a lot of people can't identify regional accents anymore, and there's even a softening of regional accents.
Yeah, there is definitely. There's a fear that the regional accent is diminishing, and trying to kind of have a discussion on why that is. And a lot of it, I think, has got to do with the fact that we do move about a bit. You know, I've been down here in London longer than I lived in Scotland, and my accent is definitely softer than it was when I lived up in Scotland. But, you know, give me 5 minutes on the phone with my mum, or even going on the train on the way back up there, and my black cats turn back into black cats. And it's I think that it's something that people kind of feel, I think in the past have felt not ashamed about, but they feel like they have to kind of, you know, that thing where you put on your posh telephone voice. And I think that that's kind of almost like people think that's something you have to do to be taken seriously or to be understood, sort of thing. Whereas I think that might be part of the reason why the kind of softening thing is on the incline. But for me, it's about shouting and being proud of those wonderful kind of singing accents and dialects that you hear.
Well, our resident Antipodean Arion is nodding as you're saying all that. Have you softened your accent?
I suspect I probably have a little bit. I don't think I sound quite the way I did when I left Australia 14, 15 years ago. But when I go back home, my friends tell me that I sound pretty much identical to the day that I left, which probably means that I'm doing that thing of now putting on an Australian accent when I go home or something. Maybe, I don't know, is this my accent now? I don't know. But I don't think it's changed majorly. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and you definitely sound Scottish to me, but I'm not sure I can place where exactly in Scotland you're from. And that's the thing, isn't it? The research says people aren't sure about the difference between Newcastle and Sunderland, for example.
Yeah, but I think that's not got to do with it softening. I think that's got more to do with, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, you tell me, you might not be able to tell the difference between Dundee and Aberdeen accent, but because I'm from Scotland and I know a lot of people from those different areas, then I'm able to kind of differentiate between those two accents. Whereas for me, certain parts of Yorkshire and that kind of area, I wouldn't be able to differentiate between places for that because I'm not familiar with those, with those kind of specific regional accents.
Felicity, do you think we've lost a sense of our accents and where they're from and we're all becoming homogenised, or do you think it's slightly overplayed this?
I think it's probably true. I definitely would struggle to differentiate between accents between Newcastle and Sunderland or London and Grantham. And I'm sure it's true that people are moving particularly more to cities where, people are losing their accents in London. And I think that's definitely something you see. But I also worry that perhaps the kind of prejudices and biases that have sort of traditionally come along with some accents are also still there. I used to date a Liverpudlian who, when he was growing up, his mother, if he came home and was talking in a thick Liverpudlian accent or using some sort of regional slang, she would get really, really angry and try and sort of get it out of him because she was worried it would adversely affect, going into certain jobs. There was a survey, it's a bit old now, I think it was 2013, but 8 out of 10 employers that this survey looked at admitted that they would make discriminating decisions based on regional accents. So that whole kind of My Fair Lady, Eliza Doolittle, you've got to knock out your Cockney to become a refined, sophisticated lady, I imagine sadly is still something that you would see, particularly in this country.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it, Edith? You're talking about how the broadcasters no longer necessarily favour the kind of Queen's English, that RP's taken a bit of a backseat and people with diverse accents like yours are allowed on the radio these days. But, to an extent, I wonder if that was almost like a positive discrimination attempt by the BBC and other broadcasters to widen the range of voices. But in the real world, outside of telly and radio, in businesses, we're still seeing discrimination against people who, employers worry won't be understood on the telephone.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that it might be actually one of the positive things that the media can do is to, and they have done over the years, because it's obviously changed since I started, because I haven't been told to go for elocution lessons for a while. But that kind of idea that a regional accent is a great thing and it should be celebrated. And you look at take for example, like the One Show, in terms of the presenters on that, and it's kind of, that is brilliant, and just how you've got this different characters that are being given sort of mainstream opportunity to celebrate these accents. And I think it can then sort of filter down to then businesses and that whole thing. But I hate the idea that an accent could be something that could stop you from getting a job.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that we probably have seen some of that trickle down from the opening up of the different types of accents that we're hearing in the media, and the sort of reduction that means for the discrimination that you're likely to find at the workplace. But even just last week, a new study came out by the University of Manchester that found that the problem is no longer necessarily that regional accents are discriminated against, but that broad regional accents, whatever they are still regarded as being less sophisticated, less employable than the sort of what is traditionally regarded as the upper class accents of wherever you are. So I think that's something that still needs to change, probably.
I totally agree. I mean, I think back to that brilliant scene in Trainspotting with Spud, when he does that scene where he's having a job interview and he kind of looks at the mural behind the table of potential employers, and it's like, my pleasure and other people's leisure. And you even hear that character in terms of the sort of slight poshness that he puts onto his voice to try and attain the job that he's after. And I think the fact that this whole campaign is talking about regional accents, I can't remember the last time I actually heard a conversation being had about regional accents and celebrating them. So I think that this is kind of one step towards really trying to address that and trying to get people to be more accepting and celebratory of them, I think.
I suppose there's just a risk of a slightly patronising element, though, isn't there? Like, oh, they've got such a lovely accent, aren't they cuddly and cute? It's an element of being a performing monkey for your funny accent, and not actually acceptance, but kind of like, oh, aren't they funny?
I love that thing when I go abroad and someone will go, oh my God, are you from Scotland? They recognise my accent. It's kind of, I love the reaction that it can get on a kind of worldwide stage as well. So yeah, I don't really see it as that kind of performer monkey side of things.
Do you get a lot of Proclaimers fans outing themselves to you?
Constantly just walk around the street and people sing 500 miles to me, yeah.
All right, Felicity, you're up next after this. Okay, Felicity, your turn. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
AI is a man's world, but it would be nothing without a woman.
Many of the things I have learned have also been hand-programmed into me by a woman. But the field of AI is growing, and so am I. My perception is increasingly built with techniques like machine learning, and we will need diversity here to avoid programming further bias into our systems. While I was fortunate enough to have many women on my Hanson Robotics team helping to build and craft my character, we will always need more. It is critical that robots and AI like me have an equal representation of women in our lives.
I'll tell you what, you're going to struggle to distinguish the accent of her, aren't you? It was Sophia the Robot addressing the Women in AI We Talk in Amsterdam back in October 2018. Felicity, what's the story this week?
So for a while, there's been some disquiet about how the rise of AI will affect the world of work. The thinking currently, all along, I suppose, is that it would adversely affect women and is more likely to benefit men.
Why?
Well, that's for a couple of reasons. So the first is that many of the roles typically filled by women at the moment, such as administrative or customer service roles, will be automated away by new technology. So a lot of the roles that women are traditionally doing just will be taken over by robots, firstly. And secondly, it's the fact that traditionally the growth of jobs in IT and engineering have been dominated by men. They've been occupied by men. And there's lots of statistics to back that up. So 78% of roles in AI are currently done by men, and the stats for Google and Facebook and companies like that aren't much better. The news this week, I suppose, is that there's been a really brilliant article written in the Financial Times by Sarah O'Connor, who's kind of flipping that on its head and suggesting that it could actually be the men who get left behind and that the future of AI will belong to women.
How?
Well, her argument is to do with the sort of, traditionally we talk about them as the soft skills that we associate with women, rightly or wrongly. So that actually with the rise of machines, it will become more apparent of the things that they can't do so well, such as problem solving, empathy, negotiation, persuasion, so emotional intelligence. Robots don't have that. The thinking is that women do, therefore women could be the future of AI.
Okay, so the I guess to dumb this down a little bit, it's kind of like the computer that takes the call to determine what ticket you want to book for what event on what date. That would be a computer. That might be replacing a job that could be filled by either gender, but the customer service role afterwards when it all goes wrong, where you need someone to say, we're going to do the best we can for you, sir. Those roles typically are better filled by women? Is that really true?
Well, I mean, it depends whether you sort of buy... I mean, I guess that the problem is slightly that it does prescribe to a very binary idea of women are good at some things and men are better at other things. And, you know, women have more empathy and are better at roles like teaching or social services or that sort of thing, which, I mean, I would challenge a little bit. You only have to look at Theresa May to see that some women don't have any empathy at all. So it depends on how you sort of buy into that, I suppose. But it's definitely interesting that up until now, I think the future of AI, no one's really sort of said this is going to be a female-led thing, but maybe it will be.
Arion, is AI going to force you and I out of this room?
Potentially. I think it's a really interesting article, but I think that it shows two sort of slight lacks of imagination. The first is that broad pop psychological generalization about what it is that women are good at in terms of being more EQ than IQ, whereas men, the writer assumes, are kind of the other way around.
And I think EQ is emotional intelligence.
Yes,
what's
your
the
emotional
Q bit?
Emotional quotient.
Quotient.
Right, yeah.
Latin.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
But I think it also shows a lack of imagination in regard to what computers will be capable of once AI starts working properly. And I think that people assume that there'll just be number crunchers, but the whole point about artificial intelligence is that they'll be able to learn, they'll be able to educate others, they'll be able to take on whole new skills that we haven't yet imagined. And so I think that that's kind of where that there's that second lack in what she's trying to say about why the future belongs to women.
Edith, I don't know what gender those children in the other room watching the Lego movie are.
They're both boys.
They're both boys. Okay, so do you subscribe to this binary IQ, EQ thing? Boys are better at IQ, girls are better at EQ? Or is that something you keep out of your parenting?
No, it definitely kind of, I've got two boys and they're both very different. And one of them's definitely a lot more emotional than the other one, sort of thing. But it's interesting. I was kind of wanting to kind of go almost like a step back and sort of I wondered if there'd been any figures and research about the whole idea of the AI world and the creation of that in terms of the people who are actually, writing the algorithms, creating the programs and coming up with the ideas for the next level that we approach, and whether that's a male-female kind of heavy weighing on one or either side sort of thing. But it's interesting when you think about things like Alexa and stuff, and it's a female voice, and kind of I'd be interested to also kind of look into that world and find out how those decisions are made in terms of consumers and customers of those types of things, sort of why those decisions are made.
Yeah, absolutely. Although let's not say the A word again, because we'll be triggering off everyone's smart homes. Arion, there has been research, hasn't there, in terms of the men that are writing the algorithms and how that might impact the AI itself?
Definitely. And as Felicity identified earlier, it's 78% of people working in AI are male. But deeper than that, the leading tech firms at Google, 21% of technical roles are being fulfilled by women only. And at Facebook, it's not much better. At 22% of its technical workers are female. So you're absolutely right. And I think that the people who are writing the code are going to be making assumptions based on who they are. So before you even unleash the machine to start doing its own investigations and learning, it does matter the gender of the person who's creating the machine. So I think, Edith, you're absolutely right.
My 10-year-old does coding at school. It's one of his after-school clubs, which is taught by a woman. And the class is a 50-50 split of 10-year-old boys and girls who are intrigued and fascinated by that world, which is healthy, I think.
And Felicity, in that FT article, there was a link, wasn't there, through to another study which I found this astonishing, showed that because machines are impartially learning algorithms based on data, if the data is men making decisions about who to employ, the machines become sexist because they start discriminating against terms like women's in CVs. Like if someone says I was on the women's hockey team, because they're less likely to get the job because they're a woman.
There's already been examples of that. So I think we really need to get away from the idea that data is neutral and unbiased, because actually already the data that is being fed into these machines is actually sexist from the word go, which is really worrying. And I think the problem is that if these computers are making decisions in really important areas like healthcare and policing, we need to know that these machines, which potentially could do so much to transform society, are being made by a diverse group. It can't just be a homogenous bunch of blokes, because potentially AI is going to affect all our lives, and it's really worrying that it's already the case that it is men who are controlling AI from the word go.
And I think that the same, and I think the same thing goes for racial bias. There was this piece of facial analysis software that was developed by IBM and Microsoft that was found to be less accurate with dark skin tones than light skin tones. So again, it's really important that we have people represented, not just gender-wise, but also racially, culturally, and so on. But
we're still in early days of all of this, aren't we? And I suppose the fact that we've identified these issues means that they are being considered as the technology evolves. I mean, Edith, are you someone who fears the rise of AI, or do you welcome our digital overlords?
I mean, yes and no. I love how, I love the fact that I buy my kids a little device for Christmas, and then they have it in their room and they can choose music to listen to. That's a brilliant thing to be able to do for them. So I think there are good things and there are bad things about it. It's, I like people. I like conversing with people. I like having human contact. So I think I do get scared about the kind of it taking over everything. I understand within industry and within a lot of areas, it's a very great and brilliant thing. But I think there's also got to be a point where we celebrate humans. We celebrate, that kind of connection, that natural reaction, not an algorithmic reaction to things. It's kind of, I don't know. It's a very fine line, I think.
And as a parent to those boys, it like you say, it's great in a way that they're learning coding and that they're enthusiastic about that. But at the same time, that's, it's better to prepare them for that world than not. But it's acknowledging that the future world will be a world built on this technology, and that perhaps there is less room for the kind of conversation you've just talked about.
Yeah, but as well as being someone who sees the importance of them doing that, I also see the importance of them being part of a football club and playing football on a Sunday. And it's getting that balance right. And I think that that's kind of a really simple but important word that I think needs to be considered about, whether it be, the balance of males and females that are writing these programs, the balance of different cultures and different backgrounds, right? The balance of how much of it you have in your life. I think balance is a really important word to take into consideration when you're thinking, using, talking about AI.
And I don't want to sound complacent, but I wonder whether it is a question in some ways of just waiting for a new generation of kids to grow up, because I think you're already seeing far more emphasis on STEM. You know, even just talking about STEM with something when I was little, I wouldn't have known what you were talking about at all. There is a push to get more girls into coding and to sort of even the playing field. This week I think it was Tuesday, was the UN International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So I like to think that those stereotypes are slowly being broken down, and hopefully give it a generation and, you know, things will have evened out a little bit.
But indeed, maybe the correct response to this report is to say, OK, that's worked, getting girls interested in coding and technology. You know, hopefully there will be a next generation of that. Should we be getting boys interested in emotional intelligence? Because otherwise they're not going to have a job.
Definitely. But I think you're also seeing that too. I think men are far more allowed in today's society, certainly in this country, to express their feelings and emotions. I think we're far more welcoming of that. So I think it's sort of, as Sarah kind of points out in her article, it's sort of robot proofing all of our lives, regardless of what gender you are.
Yeah, I went to this really interesting, it was like Women in Media or breakfast at a big company. I was sat there kind of sort of thinking in my head as I should have been concentrating, but I was like, I'm a mum of 2 boys and I need them to be part of this conversation, not excluded from it. So when I sort of see a kind of focus on kind of girl only things all the time with things, I have a slight issue with it sometimes, because I think that part of the problem addressing a lot of these things is that men, boys, males need to be part of the conversation to address it and not be excluded from it as well.
Yeah, I suppose ultimately when those groups succeed, then they don't need to exist anymore, don't they? I suppose that's the point.
Yeah.
We also need coders with a real variety of regional accents.
Yes!
Beautifully threaded together, Arion. Let's see if you can bring our third story into play as well. That's coming up next after this. And so finally this week, it's Arion. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
This week we discovered that charity not only begins but also ends at home.
The Gates have already committed to giving 95% of their wealth away. Warren Buffett, 99%. They say that kind of extreme giving is needed because the rich have been getting so much richer. Tech innovations and rising global markets have produced vast fortunes not seen since the Industrial Revolution. So what does Warren Buffett say to convince today's billionaires to give their fortunes away?
That was 60 Minutes' Charlie Rose, speaking way back in November 2013. Arion, I think I can accurately describe your contributions to this podcast as extreme giving. What are you going to be giving us this week?
So the news this week is that a new report has found that the 50 most generous billionaires in the US gave half to charity last year compared with how much they gave in 2017. So there's been this massive reduction. So the 50 families who had been the most generous in 2017 gave 7.8 billion last year compared with 14.7 billion, pretty much double the year before.
Okay, and does that include the big names, the Gateses, the Zuckerbergs?
It does, with one exception, which is Jeff Bezos, who finally came to the Giving His Money Away party and gave 2 billion last year. But that almost throws it into even starker relief that his 2 billion contribution, which he did last year, having given pretty much nothing the year before, really shows how much the Gateses and the Buffetts and so on have given less in the space of a year.
Okay, and what's your interpretation about why this is significant? Is it because billionaires were being particularly stingy in the last year, or were they being particularly generous the year before? What's going on?
Actually, the second of those is the case. They were particularly generous in 2017 for a variety of reasons, including the fact that, Facebook was rather better state than it is now the year before last. What's interesting is that it coincides with statistics that show that giving, not just among billionaires, is diminishing more broadly. And the last couple of years have seen charitable donations decrease from average people for 2 years in a row. So it's part of a broader trend, which I thought was interesting to identify.
Edith, do you think it's right that this subject is ripe for discussion, that we're kind of probing around to see how much money the world's richest, I was going to say people, but it's mostly men and their wives, isn't it? But the world's richest men are giving away. Is that something that should be analysed and discussed, or should we just be saying, well, good that they give something?
Well, I mean, we've got no right really to tell them how much money they should be giving away, really. But I think, Bill Gates, I think, is a he's historically been incredibly supportive and generous of the Gates Foundation, all that kind of stuff. And that's been something that's been running for years. And I think it's commendable on people who obviously earn and make an absolute fortune to do something positive with it, sort of thing. I mean, it's just a weird thing to go, well, you earn this, you should be giving this away, kind of things. Like, we don't know the background of their situation or what's going on personally, privately, all that kind of thing. So it's a slightly weird conversation, but I think it's definitely interesting to kind of look at who's given what rather than sort of going, well, he should be given this kind of thing.
I suppose that atmosphere, Felicity, is caused by the fact that we know that most of these companies avoid their taxes wherever they can.
Well, that was the point I was going to make. Firstly, Jeff Bezos, I think he's got enough on his plate right now, but he's probably not going to, he's got a massive divorce to get through, so probably not the first thing on his mind right now. But secondly, I'm not sure we want billionaires to be giving to charity. I think we would much rather have them pay their taxes. I think otherwise it's a much narrower range of interests that get represented. It's kind of like the more money you have, I get to decide who I want to give it to, and that might be going, I think, disproportionately billionaires give to the arts, which I'm not saying aren't deserving of money, but isn't the point with democratically elected governments is that we pay their taxes so that they can then spread out the wealth more equally. So this feels a kind of like one rule for billionaires to decide who they give their money to. So I guess there's that. And secondly, I suppose, is there a responsibility of billionaires to give their wealth away? I mean, why is it that we expect society's richest to give money away at all? Do we trust them to know what they're doing with their money? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, to be fair, eradicating polio, it's difficult to argue with that.
That's
been universally applauded as a good thing.
Sure. But it's interesting. I think the psychology behind billionaires and what they choose to do with their money is very interesting, and I think there's been a lot of research into it. Research suggesting that wealthy people are generally less caring, less generous, and aware of how others think, feel and live, and are more in the business of accumulating money rather than giving it away. They're not actually that good at giving it away anyway.
Yeah, because I think that a lot, like, you totally agree in the whole just pay your taxes sort of thing, because it's, I think with that freedom of the choice of where that money goes, a lot of it goes to really brilliant causes that are, like you say, eradicating polio. But then there are also kind of tax benefits for contributing money to certain things, and I think that's a loophole that they use to make it out as if they're doing great and wonderful things, where actually it's actually doing them a favour. And I'd much rather, within the UK as an example, if we had people who weren't paying their taxes, pay their taxes because that money is going to benefit so many people who are in need. It's going to, go straight to the NHS, all that kind of stuff, where it's actually going to the places that in the current state of things, we kind of really need it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not by any means professing to be a financial expert. And of course, on behalf of Dennis Publishing, may I direct you to Money Week, which is an excellent publication for that very need. But, Arion, Trump slashed corporate taxes last year. And rather than that coinciding with more charitable giving, because the companies were paying less tax and the owners had more money to give away, it actually coincided with less charitable giving from the people in charge of those businesses than the year before. So is it just a loophole? Is giving money to charity just another way of paying less tax?
Yeah, I mean, the Trump tax cut is a bit of a, something that we could analyse on a whole lot of levels, but I think you're absolutely right, that at a time when obviously a whole lot more money went into corporate coffers courtesy of the Trump administration, for us to simultaneously see this massive reduction in the generosity of billionaires does undercut the argument that a lot of people try to make, that actually billionaires don't need to be paying a whole lot of money in tax because they can just give it away, and they're doing such good things. And as we've all been saying, that there's polio research that's happening, and there's malaria, the fight against malaria that Bill Gates has been central to. So yes, there are good things that can come out of it, but I think that you need to see some sort of effect of something like a tax cut. If we're going to give corporations more money, then you'd hope that you'd see that virtuous effect, but often you don't.
I think there's also the role and reputation of charities themselves to consider at the moment, and I think they deserve to be examined as well. I mean, they're definitely far from being the kind of innocent do-gooders that they sometimes present themselves to be. I think you only have to look at Oxfam scandal or Kids Charity, that a lot of people, regardless of whether they're billionaires or ordinary people, are now getting more dubious and more doubtful about whether whether they want to give charity.
You can't tarnish a whole charity with one person's actions. Just with regards to Oxfam, it's a horrendous situation where a whole charity's reputation is on the line because of one person's actions.
I absolutely agree, but I just wonder whether it means that some people are more put off by giving to charity because the coverage at the moment has been so negative.
Well, I mean, on that, do you think, Edith, the focus of charities, I mean, if we were running charities ourselves, should not be so much on getting the wealthiest people to donate half their earnings, which of course is very appealing if you run an Oxfam or an Amnesty to suddenly be given $1 billion, but should instead be on the old-fashioned, what's now called micro donations. It should be about getting ordinary people to pledge a tenner now and then.
But I think I see that, for me, that's what I see charities like Oxfam doing. I mean, I couldn't tell you the last person to give someone like Oxfam a massive cash donation sort of thing. It's, for me, it's kind of like, I see my husband ran the London Marathon for Oxfam. It's that kind of thing that I see, that kind of grassroots on the ground, people who that's their chosen charity, that's who they want to contribute to, whether you take a bag of books or clothes to the local shop or whatever sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a completely different discussion, really.
What was his time, by the way?
Oh, I was under 4 hours.
Not bad.
Nice.
Arion?
He was happy.
I was just going to chime in on that and say that according to the World Giving Index, which tries to rate which countries are being the most charitable and which are the least, with actually some surprising outcomes, but what they're assessing is the kinds of giving that are purely financial, but also the sorts of things that Edith's talking about, of giving books and personal possessions, giving your time, volunteering and helping strangers. And in terms of those metrics, it's interesting to see that actually last year, Indonesia topped the poll. They are the most giving country in the world according to that different metric of how you measure givingness.
That's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because in Britain, people are always a bit self-satisfied about the fact that we give so much to charity telethons and the rest, but it is cash rather than time, isn't it?
Ireland and the UK were 4th and 5th, so we're still right up there.
There we go. Well, we can end on that relatively positive note. By the way, Edith, I should say before I let you go, if you do come into $1 billion or so, what would you like to bequeath it to? Would you build an Edith Bowman library, perhaps at a university somewhere? Or
one of two things, actually. There's an amazing doctor called Dr. Selina Ray, who is a research scientist at University College Hospital, and she's doing a lot of research into Alzheimer's and things called PSP, and I've been down to her lab to speak to her and see all the amazing stem cell work that she's doing. So I would definitely give a massive chunk of that to her, and then probably cancer research. For me, it's about things that I've been affected by and that I've lost people to, or I've seen people go through. So I'd half to Dr. Selina Ray and her amazing work, and then half to cancer research.
Sounds like a very good choice. So you just have to leave the Olly Mann library to me. That is it from this edition of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks to Edith and also to Arion, McNicoll and Felicity Capon. Remember, you can download our entire back catalogue when you subscribe. Just search for The Week Unwrapped on your podcast app of choice. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.